Hi guys. All right, tonight we will be looking at the first part of emails and memos. I know last week we had a long video lecture. Tonight will be shorter. Thank you for being patient with me. All right, so with emails and memos, as you will discover this week and next week, a lot of things are similar about these guys. Their construction and what you would include, how you format them can be very similar. So unless I state somewhere in the lecture that it's just for emails or just for memos, then you can assume that what I'm saying applies to both. All right, so we're going to start with format and structure tonight. Alrighty. So whether electronic or hard copies, email messages and memos generally contain 4 parts. Those are an informative subject line that summarizes the message, an opening that reveals the main idea immediately, a body that explains and justifies the main idea, and of course an appropriate closing. Now, just a word here about the body. Try to make sure that your body is not more than 3 paragraphs long, especially in an email. The amount of text that you can see on the screen right now is pretty long for an email, honestly. Sometimes it might be better to construct a memo and attach it to the email so that you might be able to include a little more information. But in general, try to keep both to 3 paragraphs, which can be a bit large. You definitely don't want to be more than 500 words. Let's put it that way. Alrighty, so in emails and memos, an informative subject line is mandatory. You have to tell them why you're writing. So especially in emails, I'm sure you know how frustrating it can be to receive an email and you don't know if you should open it or not because you don't know what the person wants. You don't know if this subject is urgent. And you might open it and find out that it's spam or it's whatever. Make sure you include a subject line. It also matters for memos as well. They need to have a title, and so people know what it's going to be about, so that when they're walking along in the hallways and they see that title or that subject, they know whether they should stop and read it, if it applies to them or not, or if it interests them. So your subject or your title summarizes the central idea, and thus it provides a quick identification for the reader to know what it's about, like I said, or when filing things, because some companies keep track, whether electronically or in an actual filing cabinet, of the memos or emails that are sent. You also probably have different folders on your email accounts where you keep certain things. If you see what the subject is, it might help you organize them. It's not just about who it's from sometimes, right? All right, so in email messages, as I've said, subject line, gotta have it. There's nothing more frustrating than getting an email, even from your best friend, with no subject line. You're like, what do you want? So, some emails without subject lines might get deleted. So you don't want to risk the person not reading your message, especially if it's important. So include subject lines. So what does it take to get your message read? Well, a sure way to get your message deleted anyway would be, or ignored for that matter, would be to only have 1-line headings in the subject. So you might say something like important, or help, or problem. These don't tell me much. You got to tell me why it's important, what it's about, what do you need help with, what is the problem. So including a word such as free is also pretty dangerous. So try to avoid free in your subject lines, because this might trigger people's spam filters and they won't even get it. So maybe include free in the body of the email text, but not in your subject lines. Try to make your subject line talk, so to speak, by including a verb. Explain the purpose of the message and how it relates to the reader. Like, need you to showcase 2 items at our next trade show, rather than just trade show, right? So yes, this is a long subject potentially for an email, let's say, but it's more clear to the reader what you want rather than just trade show, right? So just be aware of that. Oh, I do not want you anymore. Okay. So update your subject line to reflect a current message, like staff meeting rescheduled for May 12th, rather than which is regarding, right? Regarding the staff meeting. Oh my gosh. People will be like, dude, I'm going. Who cares? It matters that it got rescheduled, so tell them that in the subject line. Now, a subject line is usually written in an abbreviated style, often without the articles. So this is nice. You get to omit those articles. It doesn't have to be a complete sentence, and it doesn't have to end in a period. Go, subjects, go! All right, so most emails and memos cover non-sensitive information that can be handled in a straightforward manner, things that are probably general information for the employees or announcements. So you want to begin by front-loading and revealing the main idea up front using the direct method. So even though the purpose of the memo or the email will be summarized in your subject line, that purpose needs to be restated or amplified in the first sentence of the message. So notice here, we're going to do an example together, how the following indirect opening can be improved by front-loading or by getting that main idea right up there, right up front, so people know what's going on. So for the past 6 months, the Human Resources Development Department has been considering changes in our employee benefit plan. Okay, not bad. You get it. You know what they're talking about. But how about this? Please review the following proposal regarding employee benefit, and let me know by May 20th if you approve these changes. Now, what the indirect opening is probably missing is the fact that this indirect opening is telling us, so for the past 6 months, the Human Resources Development Department has been considering changes in our employee benefit plan. We think these changes will be important because, and then they leave all these lists, and then blah, 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 they do all this writing, and then they say, please see the attached proposal and vote, or whatever, right? So you can see how using the direct method, again, just makes things a lot more straightforward. The people open the email, the first thing they read is that you want them to review this proposal regarding employee benefits. Most people will read that because they care about their benefits, but when you do all this explanation and background before you get to the main point, people are much more likely to ignore it. So especially if you think the message is important, use front loading, get it up there, get it out, and let it be one of the first things people read. So the body of your messages provides more information about the reasons for the writing, right? So they explain, or it discusses the subject logically. Okay, now we're providing our explanations after we've told people why we're writing to them. So good email messages or good memos generally discuss only one topic. Again, you got to be thinking in this business context. People don't want to be farting around. We get that there's lots going on. It's almost better to send 2 or 3 emails or 2 or 3 memos about different subjects than it is to just send one long one or a memo that's 16 pages because you need to discuss everything. Even if it's 16 pages in total, people are more likely to read a few shorter memos than one long one. So keep that in mind. Limiting the topic can help the receiver act, and again, file it appropriately if necessary. So people like the shorter stuff. They don't want to open that document and be reading and reading and reading. If you send 2 or 3, they can read them when they have the time, and it doesn't take as long per message. So the body of email messages and memos should have a very high skim value. Again, I just want to point out that you don't want them to be longer than 3 paragraphs long in general. Now, there are 3 techniques for improving the readability of your emails and memos, which include using lists, headings, and some graphic techniques, which we have seen, but we're going to review. So, using lists. One of the best ways to ensure rapid comprehension of ideas is through the use of numbered or bulleted lists. Ideas which could be formally buried within sentences or paragraphs will stand out when they're listed. Readers not only understand your message more rapidly and easily, but they also consider you efficient and well organized when they see rather than on and on and on and lots of words. Lists provide high skim values. This means that the readers use the lists to read quickly and grasp the main ideas quickly. By breaking up complex information into smaller chunks, the lists improve the readability, comprehension, and the retention of the information for your readers. Lists also force the writer to organize ideas more efficiently. So use numbered lists for items that represent a sequence or reflect a numbering system, and use bulleted lists to highlight items that don't necessarily show a chronological order to something. So here we have a couple examples. Numbered lists could have like, our recruiters follow these steps in hiring applicants. Almost like a recipe, there's an order to this, right? So they, 1, examine the application, 2, interview the applicant, and 3, check the applicant's references. Versus a bulleted list where we have, to attract upscale customers, we feature the following. So this is a list of services that they might provide. So some things like quality fashions, personalized service, and a generous return policy. So again, numbered lists for things that have an order, bulleted lists for things that can just, you want to list but don't have a specific order to them in how they have to be done. In listing items vertically, capitalize the words at the beginning of each line. So you'll see here, each time you make a new point, capitalize the word. And end punctuation only if the statements are complete sentences. Okay, be careful of this. We often see people writing lists and adding weird punctuations like you're writing poetry. Be careful, you only need the punctuation, like a period, if you're using complete sentences. The bulleted list here above are non-complete sentences. You'll notice there are no periods. Be sure to use parallel construction. We talked about this before. You'll notice that all of both lists that I'm showing here are following the parallel construction. Be careful. They all, in these examples, they all begin with verbs. So in the bulleted list, each item follows an adjective or a noun sequence. Also, so numbered, they all have a verb. Bulleted, they all follow an adjective or noun sequence. But be careful, okay? Please be careful not to overuse the listing format. This is also something that I've found students grab a hold of and they never want to let go. Don't just start throwing in lists everywhere or in places where you should be using a comma. So do not overuse this. Just be careful. It is most appropriate when you have a sequence of things or an order. Sometimes bulleted lists can be just listed by using commas, like in a full sentence. All right. Something else. Headings. Headings are another important tool for highlighting information and improving the readability of your messages. They encourage the writer to organize carefully, so that similar material is grouped together, and this helps the reader separate main ideas from details. So headings appear most often in reports. Not necessarily memos and emails, but definitely in reports. However, main headings, subheadings, and category headings can also improve readability in your email messages and memos and letters even. So here they are, used with bullets to summarize the categories. Our company focuses on the following areas in the employment process. First bullet, attracting the applicants. We advertise for qualified applicants, and we also encourage current employees to recommend good people. Another thing the company does is interviewing the applicants. Our specialized interviews include simulated customer encounters, as well as scrutiny by supervisors. And a third point, checking references. We investigate every applicant thoroughly, including conversations with former employers and all listed references. Okay, even though this looks like a sequence, and it really is, you don't have to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's okay to use these, to put these in bullet form, especially because you're adding examples afterwards. I will say something though, when you're using bullets where you could use numbers, keep the sequence. Don't think that just because you're using bullets, all of a sudden you can throw all this order out the window. Yes, you could say our company focuses on checking references, attracting people, and interviewing people. It's not terrible, I suppose, but it's really not that great either. So try to keep the sequence even when you're not using numbers. Also, sometimes something to consider when you're using a bulleted list is that the first thing or the first couple things that you list should be the most important things. All right, here are some graphic techniques that we've talked about in a previous lecture. So vertical lists and headings are favorite tools, and they really do work for improving readability. But there are other things you can use, and we've seen this. You can highlight words, which I often do. Use capitals, all capitals, underline, bold things, use italics. But just be careful, because you don't want the readers to feel overwhelmed by all this stuff going on. And you also don't want them to feel like you're yelling at them. And a final technique to enhance comprehension is blank space. Space is especially important in email messages when formatting techniques don't always work there. So grouping ideas under capitalized headings with blank spaces preceding the headings can greatly improve the readability. So don't be afraid of blank space. For example, and then let's say your email doesn't allow you to bold or underline things. You can have this and then your next paragraph. So don't be afraid of this blank space. It's okay. All right. And now I got to move that down. Closings. All right. Generally, you close an email message or a memo with action information, dates, deadlines, a summary of the message, or a closing thought. So here again, the value of thinking through your message before actually writing it will become apparent. So the closing is where readers look for deadlines and the action language, the call to action, which we've mentioned. So an effective memo or email closing might be something like, please submit your report by June 15th so that we can have your data before our July planning session. Might be a little long. We could potentially just get away with please submit your report by June 15th, but either way, that would be the last sentence of your email or memo, so people know what they have to do. In more complex messages, a summary of main points may be an appropriate way to close. So if you have something that's long, more like an essay than just a short memo or email, it might be okay to summarize at the end. If no action request is made and a closing summary is still necessary, you might end with a simple concluding thought, such as, I'm glad, oh, excuse me, I'm all capitals now. I'm glad to answer your questions, or something like, this sounds like a great project. Super good. You do not need to close your messages to coworkers with goodwill statements every time. These are usually only used in letters to customers or to clients. You don't need to use this with your coworkers on a regular basis. But some closing thoughts are often necessary to prevent the feeling of abruptness. Closing can show gratitude or encourage feedback. So you can use remarks such as, I sincerely appreciate your help, or what are your ideas on this proposal? Other closings look forward to what's happening next, such as, how would you like to proceed with this? Now, avoid closings with overused expressions such as, please let me know if I may be of any further assistance. Remember when we talked about like older language or language that you don't need to use because some people think it's professional but it's not necessary? This would be one of them. This ending sounds very like copy paste from Google kind of thing. Now, make sure that you do type your name. It identifies who you are and it helps the reader sort out your messages within a string of messages, especially if you've got like 3, 4, 5, 15, 30 people in one message. You definitely need to be signing off, even if you're only giving 1 or 2 word answers, so that people know who's saying what. Sometimes your email address isn't generated, so it could also be a good idea to include that. Now, for messages going to an outsider, you should also include a closing, especially if it's a message where you've written more than 1 or 2 words. So you can use things like all the best. Followed by the writer's name. So like all the best. Here, I'll show you. Like this. And your email address. Because, as I said, some systems do not transmit this automatically. Now, if the recipient is unlikely to know you, then it's wise to include your title, organization, and your full address and telephone number. And then, world, skills, and then the address and everything else. So it might be good to have like a signature line, which most people have. So when you start at a new job, or even just with your regular Gmail accounts, you might want to consider including something like a signature line so that people know how to get in contact with you a few ways if they can't reach you or if they really need to talk to you. All right, so that's it for the first part of emails and memos. I'll see you in class. Good job, guys. Bye.